Andy Stumpf, a candid conversation with Andy Stumpf, exploring authenticity, mental health, and controversies in the military. I've just wrapped up an incredible show with none other than Andy Stumpf, a man whose resume reads like an action hero's, former Navy SEAL Team 6 operator, double world record holder, skydiving and wingsuit legend, and Ironclad presenter and podcast host. Let me tell you, our conversation was nothing short of inspiring. We covered military mindset and beyond. We dove deep into what fuels Andy's relentless drive, from his military experiences to his epic 777 expedition. He shared his unique perspective on achievements and how resilience and continuous growth are the real badges of honour. The pursuit of excellence. Andy debunked some common myths about special forces, emphasising that it's not all about physical prowess. Instead, adaptability and mental resilience are the true cornerstones of success in the face of adversity. Parenting and pushing limits. We also touched on the importance of teaching resilience to our kids and the transformative power of stepping out of our comfort zones. It's about embracing hardship as a pathway to growth. Teamwork and sacrifice. The 777 expedition was a testament to the power of teamwork and the practical challenges of pursuing such a monumental goal. Andy's candid recount of the logistical hurdles they faced was a lesson in determination. A soldier's tale. Andy opened up about a harrowing experience of being shot during a mission in Iraq, offering a raw and honest account of the incident and his road to recovery. It's a story of vulnerability and the strength found in breaking down goals into manageable steps. Mental health and authenticity. We didn't shy away from tough topics, discussing the curated facades on social media and the importance of authenticity. I shared my skepticism about certain public figures and the need for transparency and honesty. Controversy and community. The conversation took a turn as we addressed some controversies within the Special Forces community, exploring the impact of scrutiny and the response to ethical breaches. It's a reminder that accountability and integrity are paramount. Connecting and conversing. Finally, we celebrated the power of the internet to connect us with our heroes and the positive impact of authentic conversations. Andy left us with some profound advice on finding passion and purpose and the importance of self-discovery before committing to others. I'm beyond grateful for the wisdom Andy shared, and I can't wait for you to join us on this journey. So tune into the latest episode for a dose of real talk and life lessons that just might change your perspective. You can find Andy on the show notes below, andystumpf.com, on Insta, andystumpf212, and with Ironclad. And again, the show notes are below. Thanks for watching. I'm Damien Porter, former New Zealand Special Forces operator, subject matter expert from hownotodie.com.au. And you're listening to my Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast, sponsored by these guys, mystate.com, the ultimate daily formula for optimum hormone health, stress management, energy, and performance. 100% natural and clinically proven ingredients, it provides everything you need to raise your game in a convenient, gut-friendly capsule. Links for my former shows are in the show notes below. Thanks for watching. And we're live. Welcome to the Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast. Welcome to my guest this morning, all the way from USA, like many, Andy Stumpf. Thank you.
What's going on, man?
Hey, look, really cool to have you on. And it was amazing us texting back and forth last week. And you reminded me it was a year to the day that we actually met at the pinnacle of the 777 world record and jump as well.
Yeah, odd, random, and I guess fortuitous timing. Yeah, you happen to be connecting with me that day. And I'm not great with, I do a good job of remembering my kids' birthdays and important people's birthdays and my wedding anniversary, but I struggle with a lot of the other ones. And Jericho, of all people, is very good at posting things from the past. And he happened to post about that shortly before I got your text. And that's really the only way I would have remembered it.
Oh, man, it was a great reminder of how fast time goes, but also we need to go back, especially at my age. I won't say our age because I'm a few years ahead of you, I think. You got to go back and pay respect to those memories. So that was a really cool reminder for me. And I guess that's probably part of where we're going to jump off. We've done the intro prior to this. People get the show notes on the video and the audio, so they know what you're about. But you're a double world record holder. You've done a whole bunch of different things. I wanted to ask you maybe a question no one else has asked you is what drives you? What drives you now past what you did in the military? What drives you to do all the things that you're doing now?
Um, I don't know. I mean, to be honest, I don't really view them as I mean, they were cool things to do, and my desire to do them is largely the 777 as an example. I mean, it was fun, so I'm kind of pursuing my own passion to a degree, but it had a higher purpose, raising money for educational scholarships for the children of those left behind, military members and first responders. So it's a combination of those two things. But I'm not a collector of things or titles. Um, so it was good. It happened. It was in the past. And I don't have like a fire under my ass to look for like the next big thing. I know that I enjoy learning and I enjoy doing things that challenge me. So I guess more than anything, that's the true north of my compass. But I don't have crazy lofty goals. Like I really could give two shits about a world record. I think they sent a certificate and I don't know where it is. It was at the coffee shop for like 6 or 7 months, and I think my wife finally moved it back to our house, but I don't know because I don't care. It's never going to go on the wall. I don't have a single piece of military memorabilia anywhere in the house or on the wall or any of those things. And nothing against people that do have those things because they're meaningful, but it's not as meaningful to me. I just don't care. So I look for things that sound interesting or sound challenging or present to me an opportunity where I could continue to learn. I think that's maybe what, if you could say what drives me is a continued desire to be a learner.
That's a good answer. And it took me a bit to come up with that question. I try and get an angle on a show. I don't sit there and write out set questions. It's not my gig. But I thought to myself, hang on a sec, this guy's done so much. And it does seem like a lot of special forces guys are like that. I mean, you've got 2 SAS guys going on to become professors, and there was a New Zealand SAS guy that ended up becoming an anaesthetist. I mean, the amount of study that's there is insane. So I think one of the tenets of our unit is the unrelenting pursuit of excellence. I think that can apply to the mindset of so many special operators as well.
Yeah, I wish it applied to everybody. It sucks that it has to be applied to a small niche unit inside of the military. If you look at the occupation, at least in my opinion, it's just nonlinear problem solving is really all it is. Even through the training pipeline, they throw things at you. And there's probably a misconception from people, and I try to talk about this when people talk about, who makes it through buds and who doesn't. And it's really not anything to do with physicality. It's people who can encounter adversity and it becomes motivation and not a roadblock. But also, you could easily turn any of the training pipelines into a no fail pipeline by testing people on things that you didn't teach them. So a lot of the like main testing gates are very well documented, like Hell Week or Pool Comp, the phase that I used to teach. But they leave out all the stuff you do leading up to it. Hell Week is the 5th week of the first phase. And all you're doing in those 5 weeks is practicing the things you're going to be tested on in Hell Week. Now, obviously, it's much harder and you don't get any sleep, but it's not your first time doing any of those things. Pool Comp is a very arduous test that occurs at the end of a week, but the week leading up to it is breaking it down into individual evolutions, crawl, walk, run, and you develop this ability to just work your way through problems, assuming you know the actual solution and you can take the time to practice. And it's a great mindset, and you can apply that mindset to anything in life. It doesn't have to be military related. I mean, I'm not saying you can go out and recommend you build a space shuttle because you're like, oh, incrementally break this down, like not use with caution. But what a better place the world would be if people all adopted that mindset of they want to be a learner. They're going to find things that challenge them. They're going to develop their resilience by pushing and leaning into painful or difficult things. And again, not like I'm going to saw my arm off, but maybe I'll make myself a little bit uncomfortable for whatever that means to whoever. And then the next day, a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. It just sucks, that it's always associated with a really small group of people that is an absolute fraction of the population.
I think you're talking about the outcome there, but the general population don't seem to want to or have the ability to, maybe not even have the opportunity to experienced that hardship. And I was listening to, and I've never read a Goggins book, and I've never listened to a Goggins show, but I was listening to Andrew Huberman with
Mhm.
Goggins. It was a short piece because of the biochemistry, and it was on some fancy part of the brain. Big words from these knowledgeable people about doing something that's really uncomfortable that you're kind of scared of, kind of don't want to do, like an ice bath or whatever it is. And Herdman was saying it actually grows part of that brain, or those neurons, whatever those words are. And I thought that's so true, because that's what we experienced in those units. We experienced a little bit of hardship, and we could push ourselves further and further. But maybe the general population doesn't get the opportunity to. It'd be great for them to have the outcome, like you say, but we were just kind of lucky that we managed to expose ourselves to that.
Well, I think it's something that has to be taught. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure there's some edge cases, people that come out of the box with this intuitive understanding of what comes at the end of that path. But I mean, I don't care who you are or where you are or what you do for a living. There's an opportunity to push yourself to some level of uncomfortableness every day, whether that's just going to the gym and trying something that you haven't done, or, the ice bath is an interesting example. Um, you see people whose whole life becomes about the ice bath, and they're missing the point. Or the ice bath and sauna and journaling and meditating. And the next thing you know, they can't accomplish in their day because it all becomes about those things. And I don't think that's what it was ever supposed to be about. Do hard things for the value that difficulty provides to you. It's not actually about the thing. Like, find your own hard thing. I don't care if your hard thing is restricting your diet, like changing the way that you are eating, getting up earlier than you want to, writing down a list of things that you normally procrastinate on and forcing yourself not to do those things. I mean, you get to define for yourself what makes you uncomfortable and what doesn't, but it has to be taught, and reinforced. It can't just be taught one time.
No, you nailed it. And that comes down to parenting. I mean, I literally got my boy here. I know you're a family man as well. And it's a quote. Can't believe I made up a quote, but my quote is, being a good parent makes you a better human. And the key word there is a good parent. It's my role to teach him how to be the best human he can be. And you're right when you said it has to be taught. And I was lucky that I was taught in the military. My dad taught me a little bit. The military really taught me how to grow up and how to look for better things. I'd like to touch on the 777, because really you've shown your humbleness, your humility, and you're actually the only guest that I've done so much research on. I'll come back to that when we talk about Lieutenant Colonel Lt Grossman. But we watched the your wingsuit world record, and you were literally, well, it doesn't mean that much to me that I've got the world record. I'm not going to do that again. But the 777 expedition, was that different than your wingsuit world record? What was the experience like there?
I mean, the jumps were easier because it was just what we would call skydiving, meaning I was just wearing street clothes and jumping out of an airplane, which is not difficult from an experience or even a practical perspective. It was much more complicated because of the different locations and all the planning that went into it. I mean, for the wingsuit jump, there was only one place in the US that did that. So we went up there and trained with the people who put that operation on. And so from a logistical perspective, that one single jump, you have an oxygen mask on and a pre-breathe and all that stuff, but that's easier than getting to Antarctica and hoping that the calendar supports you with the good weather window, and then figuring out how we're going to get from Miami to Barcelona when all the airplanes have shut down because the FAA NOTAM system in the US failed for the first time. I mean, and the tickets associated with that, the how are we going to get from point A to point B, primary, secondary, and tertiary plans for all those locations. So the jumps themselves were easy, and I'm not joking at all when I say that. They were all very technically easy, but they were made easier because of the 18 months of planning that went into that. So they were very different. The wingsuit jump was technically more difficult, but I was done in 2 hours.
Yeah. You might have to mention how easy those jumps were to Mike Sorelli, because I remember some trees, a little bit of wind, Perth, Australia, and
He's just
yeah,
not good at that. Yeah, he's not good at skydiving, and actually he would probably agree.
So what I'd like to try and dive into there, because it was a hell of a journey there. With the 777, I wrote down, how did it feel with the training? So as you said, 18 months prior, the actual during in the end,
Mhm.
rather than being a singleton. Well, you had a team around you of former military, and a lot of them in the same unit you're in. What was it like? What was the difference there? How did it feel prior, and then actually going out there, traveling these countries, getting stuff done with a team?
I mean, you bring more people, you bring more problems. And I don't mean people problems, even though it's a possibility. I mean, we're talking luggage problems, airplane delay problems. Again, the hardest part about the 777 was the logistics. What are we going to do if somebody loses a bag? And, like the tandem system, as an example, is too big to carry on an airplane. So that had to be checked. What do we do if we lose that? Do we hold everybody up? Do we wait? I mean, do we borrow one locally? And some people, like for me, when we left Antarctica, I was a carry-on bag only for the rest of the trip because my rig is smaller. But a lot of people weren't able to do that. So I mean, those were the things that we were worried about. It wasn't, can we do this? It was, how do we make sure that we check all the boxes that we can so we're not interrupted by something like that? We had a rigger supporting us along the way in case somebody had a cutaway. We could repack on the move. And there were times when we were repacking parachutes inside of buses going back and forth, to the drop zone or from the drop zone. We got back from Antarctica and I was packing rigs for people in the airport in Punta Arenas, getting ready to go up into Chile. So, you know what I mean? Like those are the issues that were hard. I had no doubts about the people that we were with. They had done 2 1-week long training camps where they were practicing, with their equipment, what order we wanted to jump. We should practice, bad weather conditions, lower altitudes, higher altitudes. So we kind of went through all the what ifs there. But truly, and again, because of that, the jumping stuff, you can just wipe that off the table when it comes to being worried about that. 18 people, 17 people traveling with us. I mean, let's say you miss a flight. That's a lot of people to try to get on an airplane within a 24 hours notice. I mean, that's the challenge. And those are the things we really worried about.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, we connected originally with a friend of ours, Kirk Parsley, or Dr. Kirk Parsley, sleep expert, great doctor. And he was brought along to, try and help out your sleep side of things, recovery side of things. And I remember chatting with him midway through or towards the first quarter, and it was just thrown out the window because you guys were literally just hanging on, eating, what you could, doing the best you could with what you've got where you were, which was crazy considering you're trying to achieve the pinnacle of skydiving through these 7 continents.
I mean, honestly, I wouldn't say it was the pinnacle of skydiving. It was just, we were trying to get to all 7 as fast as we could. So you strip away all the bullshit that most people would normally do. Like, hey, let's go see this. It's like, we don't have time to go see that. Hey, we should go to this restaurant. It's a, 2, 3 Michelin star restaurant. Yeah, that's cool. Like, we're going to get Burger King at an airport because we don't have time. And most of the time, we would get to a country, go straight to the place where we were going to jump, and then haul ass back to the airport. So when we could rest, we're, laying on top of lounges, or sofas and lounges at airports, or on top of our bags, and you're eating what's available and you're drinking what's available. And it wasn't that bad. We were traveling through the first world airports, a lot of good options. Talked about it was, economy class travel for 44,000 miles. Having your knees touch the seat in front of you, not really an ability to recline. So that stuff would wear on you. But again, it was 6.5 days. I mean, we'll be okay.
Man, you are the epitome of playing it cool and playing it down there, Andy. Well, on that point, I would like to, like I said, I did a little bit of research. I'd like to touch on something else you've spoken about in a show, and this is covering off the military guys. So we're going to cover off a bunch of different things as well. But you talked about being shot, and that related to me with a bunch of surgeries I've had as well. I remember interviewing Eric Miari's. He was part of a special missions unit, and I can't mention that name, I don't think yet. But he was pretty much a singleton, and he glossed over the first time he got shot. which blew my mind. We had to go back for the listeners because really the show's for the listeners, not for you and I so much. So can you please run us through for the military guys what was actually occurring, and then what the hell happened when you did get hit?
I mean, we can talk about it if you want. It's not a riveting story by any chance, and it's not certainly not a highlight of my career. But we were in Iraq at the time, and this is a long time ago, coming up on almost 20 years ago. So some of the details I remember well, and some of it I'll relay it to the best of my ability, and I'm completely open to being corrected by anybody else that was there. But to the best of my ability, we were looking for a kidnapping cell, and I don't think that they had actually kidnapped anybody yet. I think we had just developed actionable intelligence that that's what they were doing. So that day we were in vehicles, and Baghdad and Fallujah, they don't border each other directly, but there's not a whole lot of space in between the two. And sometimes you think you know where people are, and sometimes you're not actually sure. So we went out there with a pretty good idea, and in our attempt to refine the position where these particular people were, we kind of maneuvered through, I'll call it a residential area, even though that's probably more applicable to where I live than over there. And I'd like to say we were like all ninjas wearing booties and we don't make any noise, but that's not the case. People trip and they fall down, and it's way less like the movies than people want to think. And somebody actually came out of their house and saw us, so we pursued that individual back into the house, and I'm pretty sure there was a shotgun breach that had occurred inside of that house. It was not the house we were looking for. It wasn't the people that we were looking for. So we ended up retracing our steps and kind of bunkered down near this house that had a large, as most houses do over there, has a courtyard and a very large fence with a gate for vehicles. And we kind of set a ladder up, and I was just up on the top of the ladder looking at this building, and the guy we were with, who was responsible for specifically locating these individuals, was like, hey, this is the house. And I do remember when we walked past it the first time, there were no lights on. And when we came back and I had that position up on the ladder, the internal lights were on. Now, having said that, I didn't ever see a shadow. I never saw a movement. I didn't see any curtains. I didn't see anything. So we made a decision we were going to go and assault the target. There was an element from that same unit that was going to go around on the other side. So we were going to come at it from both directions, which is not a bad idea. We put a sniper element up onto the roof. And I hopped over into the courtyard, and in essence, we were going to go put a breaching charge on a door. I was not the breacher. I was the guy who was going to be holding one of the security positions for the breachers, protecting them while they did their work. And there was a window off of my right-hand shoulder that was darked out, and I didn't want to turn my back to it. So I at least wanted to look into it before I turned my back to it. So I turned my head to the right, and as soon as I glanced over, I heard rounds kick off from the left-hand side, my left. And the first round out just smashed right into my hip, just below my pelvis, high up on my leg, on my hip. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I don't know the actual definition between the two, but didn't feel on. Wasn't great. Spun me around, and I ended up flat on my back, actually underneath a vehicle, as there was a pretty good gunfight going back and forth from inside to outside. Unbeknownst to us, the Army unit had made entry on the other side of the building, so they were actually working down a hallway towards the people that were shooting at us, and they were engaged in a fight on the inside as well too. And the guys on our side ended up breaching. They were told to execute the breach on our side, so they did. And we actually ended up having a fratricide incident. It was a very large breaching charge on I would say, a hollow core metal door. And guys on the other side of it were probably 6 feet away. So they ate that charge. Multiple people wounded. There was people wounded from enemy fire. There was people wounded from the breaching charge. It was a shit show. And 8 people ended up getting wounded on target that night. They were landing little birds to put the most people on those and fly them to the green zone. I ended up in the back of a Bradley fighting vehicle, being driven to the green zone. I don't know how long it took to get there. I don't know, somewhere between 30 minutes to an hour. I mean, that's a guess. And then, that begins the whole process of the intake there, do what they can for you, move you to Balad, move you to Germany. Eventually you work your way back home. But I mean, that was really it. I didn't, never fired around back at the guy because I never saw him, and it spun me and threw me flat on my back before I had the chance to really do anything. And I was really stuck under a vehicle, kind of listening to all that stuff kick off around me, which sucked.
Yeah. Yeah, man. It's a perfect example of everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face, or everyone has a plan until the first ground goes off, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I stared at that window for 10 minutes and I really didn't see shit. And, under night vision goggles, and for people who don't know, it's funny. It's one of the things in the movies where people will turn the lights on and they scream, like, that's not how it works. They have a sensitivity, like if they have enough illumination, they actually shut off. And you're not actually looking through the tube. You're looking at a very small screen that is on the eye end of the tube. So it's hilarious every time that happens in the movies. I guess your eyes could hurt a little bit from the exposure to a brighter light, but night vision goggles are not going to blind you. But if you're looking at something that is very lit, it can have like this halo of, it'll really, as you turn your head to the left and right, it'll have like this little tail to it of distorted image on a lens that you're looking at. So I look underneath them. So I was looking at it not only through my night vision goggles, but I would just lift my head up a little bit. And I always have my night vision goggles set up that I could at any time look naked eye. And if I wanted to look through my nods, I just lowered my head a little bit. So I had the ability to switch back and forth, because the real world presents you not with all light or all dark. It's a mix of the two. And that seemed to work well. But man, I didn't see anything. And I obviously thought about it for a long time. Like, what could I have done better? And the reality is, I don't know if I could have done anything. I've gone to Vegas and I've watched people on the most epic heaters that you've ever seen at a craps table, throwing number after number after number after number. And the casino doesn't care because they know what's coming at some point in time. You roll a 7, they take their money. And, I think if you live in the tactical world long enough, and for some people, that's not, nothing will happen in 20 years. And that's awesome. And for some people, they go out on their first target and they get killed. I mean, that's just kind of the game we all agreed to play.
Yeah, putting yourself in harm's way. And speaking of harm, I know that injury, you know, was quite intense when you were speaking about it. How how did you get over that? I think you spoke about the bullet still being in there, but going
Yeah.
from absolutely fine and you're on a mission and you let's say air quotes bulletproof, nothing wrong, and then you've got a bullet in you and some intense nerve pain and things. Could you please talk through how you got through that? What was your mindset? Uh, you're in, you're bedridden, you're damaged, and so on. It's a big shift. Could you just talk us through what sort of processes you went through in your brain, and then how you got back to full function?
I mean, a lot of times you don't really have a choice at the velocity with which you're going to recover, which is the situation I found myself in. I mean, you can have the most positive mental attitude in the world, and it's not going to impact your nerve growth at the velocity. It's a millimeter a day or an inch a month. So that's how long. That's what the doctors told me. For anybody listening who doesn't know who I am, I'm not a doctor. Although I do watch a lot of ER and House TV here in America, but that's not how you get your doctorate. Um, so, I mean, it sucked. And quite frankly, I dealt with it in a very unhealthy manner when I first got back because I hated it and I didn't know what to do. So, in the military, a lot of people talk negatively about the military medical system, and a lot of that is very well earned. However, I think for the most part, it's people doing the best that they can. When I got back, I did fall into like the cliche, like military medicine is pushing a bunch of pill bottles on you. And, again, I've had years now to think back on this, and I don't think they were trying to kill me or be malicious. I think they were using the tools that they had available to them.
Yeah.
What they probably could have added was a little bit of oversight. So they gave me all these pills and then sent me home and like, hey, well, do your best. So I'm like, all right, I'll do my best and drink a bottle of Jack Daniels every night because they didn't tell me not to. So of course that means I probably should. And for a while I was doing that because I just couldn't sleep because of the neuropathic pain. It just felt like my leg was dipped in gasoline and lit on fire. And during the daytime, there was enough distraction in what I was doing that it didn't really bug me. But man, when you're laying in bed at night and you really just have that to pain to focus on, it'll just drive you insane. So it's like, I guess I'll take an Ambien. I'll have a couple of drinks with my Ambien. And then of course you develop a tolerance to both of those things. And then it just can spiral out of control. And it never got crazy out of control, but it got too far for me. And eventually I just went back to the gym and I slowly, and I mean very slowly, started working out in the most microscopic movements. I was drenched in sweat. And a lot of that, I think I was probably processing out a lot of the stuff that I was ingesting. But when I started doing that, I started actually, like, I would exhaust myself instead of try to drain myself to sleep. And it took time. Um, but one of the most valuable pieces of advice I've ever been given in my life is just break large goals up into small, digestible pieces. And so instead of worrying about how long it was going to take me to get back to active duty or whether or not I was going to be able to, let's just get through today. And if today is actually a real shit show, maybe let's go to the gym and get through our workout, and then we'll reassess everything else that's going on today. And we'll chunk today into 24 pieces if we need to, or 48 pieces if we need to. We'll live 30 minutes at a time or 60 minutes at a time. And you can really extrapolate that out. And that's the headspace I tried to stay in. And I really did try to celebrate microscopic improvements as opposed to focusing on how far I was from where I wanted to be and where I was in that rehab process.
Wow, thank you so much for being so open, Andy. It's rare that people have the balls to actually honestly say where their mindset was, and a lot of us find ourselves in that position, and I'm sure people that are listening and watching can relate that to their positions that they've been in. So that's really cool to hear from you. And no matter who you're looking at, I mean, social media, what a world nowadays. You've got these people on pedestals, especially in the special forces realm, and
It's all bullshit.
yeah,
Yeah, it's all bullshit. It's all
yeah,
curated. Well, here's the thing, though. People can really fuck up their perception of their own life. One of the quotes I love is that comparison is the thief of joy. And nobody has, well, I guess this is possible, but I'm sure they would correct it. I guess you could accidentally make an Instagram post like, oops, I didn't mean to post that. But most of the time, for almost everybody, they are thinking about what they are portraying to the world. And you have to remember that. I mean, it's peaks, mostly peaks, very few valleys. And then you realize some of the people are posting about the valleys because they just want more engagement. They want people to feel bad for them or whatever it may be. It's all curated. It can really fuck up your perception of who you are. And you have to remember, it's a voluntary ecosystem. People think that you have to live on these platforms, and you don't.
let's touch on that then, because one of the things I really love about you and people like Joe Rogan and also, I'm not sure if you know him, Pat McNamara, who I looked up to and is now
I know
my
who he
friend.
is. I don't.
Look, great guy. Um, we're all just human, right? We're authentic, and you guys all seem to put it out there in such a natural and organic way, rather than trying to be I'm trying to think of the word hero, or trying to be a pattern of someone. You guys are just super authentic. So let's touch on Joe Rogan. Obviously the biggest person on social media. Was he exactly like you portrayed? Was he just another human when you met him?
I really didn't know who he was the first time I met him. I had never listened to a podcast before I was on his show. I thought when I was asked about the show, about going on from a mutual friend of ours, my first thought was, that's the Fear Factor guy.
Yes,
I
you
wasn't,
you and I
I
are the
wasn't,
same genre.
yeah, yeah, but that's what I knew. Like, I think he was on a TV show, which the name of it escapes me at this point because I'd never watched it. And I wasn't training jujitsu at the time, so I wasn't really interested in the UFC, so I didn't understand his role there. I don't even think, I don't actually think I knew that he even did stand up comedy. Um, because I mean, there's great comics out there that you've never heard of because you just never come across them.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, cool, I'll sit down with the Fear Factor guy, and because that's all I knew of him, I didn't know what to expect. And it's a common question that I get, like, how is Joe? Is he different off the air than on? And I'm very happy to report that he's exactly the same. And I think that's why he's so successful. He's not trying to play a character. He's a naturally curious person that has done a lot of different things at a very high level in his life. And he has a massive platform because of it. But I think he can sleep at night well. One, because he can probably afford an amazing bed. But two, he's not wasting somebody else.
Yeah, that's so true. And it wasn't on my list of things to cover with Joe Rogan, but it just came out when you spoke about the social media and that side of things, and that now brings us. Look, I don't know how I became a podcaster because I was just an operator. I'm just a fireman, but I think I got it figured out here. I wanted to circle back to how I had to research you because I was interviewing over a year ago now Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. And again, if we're talking about
Yep.
pedestals, I'd read his book on combat 20 years ago. So for the
And on
listeners,
killing, yeah, they both of them on combat and on killing are like foundational books for a lot of organizations and military units.
yeah, and I'd read those, and I was stunned that I was going to speak to the author because that what didn't happen in the old days, but doesn't it does happen now. Before I interviewed him, I had to go back and look at your whole damn interview with him because there was some controversy there. So I want, and that maybe is a modern day update. I wanted to ask you. You interviewed him. There was some controversy there on your real world experiences versus some of the things he was saying. Could you speak to that
Yeah.
for us?
I mean, in a nutshell, he's full of shit. I mean, if we want to, let's get down to brass
Yeah,
tacks.
yeah, that's what
He's
the
writing
show
about,
is.
yeah, he's writing about something that he has no experience in. And what I realized really quickly is that he's a salesman, and I don't fault him for that. I am not anti-capitalism. I'm anti-bullshit.
Yeah,
And when he started talking to me about like jujitsu or whatever it is, and I wish I had researched it before. It's like this mix of martial arts and gun katas. I'm like, what the fuck is this? This is something that you sell to people who've never been around a firearm and live their life online thinking that they're going to be a game time player in a real two-way range. And if you pull that shit, you're going to end up getting hurt. And the most dangerous thing that you can do is convince somebody that there's something that they're not. And that's, I look at specifically, he's talking about, oh, I'm a black belt in this, and this has been used 170 times in real world situations. And I didn't know what the fuck he was talking about. And he's lucky that I didn't know what he was talking about at the time, that I hadn't researched it, because I would have called bullshit. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, this is clearly McDojo bullshit. He wants to sell books, and I am okay with that. But the information that he is reporting on, the guy breaks out for me pie charts and graphs that are handwritten. And I'm looking at these things, and it's really easy to manipulate statistics. And I don't want anybody to think that I am a master in statistics. I'm a retard, right? That's the technical description of my intellect. But I know when looking at a piece of paper that you can bracket in information to adjust the velocity and the angle of things going up and down. And when it's like much in the United States when they report on gun violence.
yeah,
They put suicide data into gun violence, and they do not separate it intentionally because they're trying to weaponize that narrative. They're hoping that people don't dig into it a little bit more, because when they do, they realize like 60% of the gun violence is actually somebody using it on themselves, which I wouldn't argue isn't violence. I mean, it's a very irrational expression of violence that I feel so badly that people arrive at that place. But it is not the same as pointing a weapon at somebody else and using it in a violent situation. So it rubbed me the wrong way. And I was in the guy's house, sitting at his dining room table, and it really wasn't the place to push back as hard as I had wanted to. But he sells books, and at the end of the day, his message is driving you towards that.
yeah. I was thinking about that question. I wrote them down yesterday, and I was coming back to him. And Lieutenant Colonel, and I try and relate things to my world. I'm a crayon guy too, Andy. I need it set out there. And I thought Lieutenant Colonel, the CEO of New Zealand SAS group at the time as a Lieutenant Colonel, so that's quite a decent rank. But I remember somewhere along the line what he was a Lieutenant Colonel of, what he was an officer of, and for some reason in my mind, crayon guy, I was logistical in some way. It wasn't combat arms or something like that. And I think you nailed it there, where he hasn't actually been in a two-way range. And I really wanted to get it from the horse's mouth, an operator speaking to this guy. Do you think, because literally quoting you, you said he's full of shit. do you think some of the things he talked about with the law enforcement, with the psychological aftermath, is relevant, or do you think he's gone down the wrong path with that as well?
I think it could be relevant, and for clarity, I don't think you have to have experienced everything that you may want to ever talk about or discuss or write a book about. Like, that's okay. It's a good thing that people aren't getting into gunfights. And you can write a book about killing. You could write a book about the emotional weight and consequences of those actions. But I think you have to be transparent about what you know and have experienced and what you are just writing about in the sum total of talking to other people. One of the issues I have with Grossman's books is he talks a lot and quotes SLA Marshall. And you can just go online and Google SLA Marshall. And he was one of the first people to report, only 10% of people actually fire their weapon at another human being. And he claimed to do, tens of thousands of interviews, and it's all been completely debunked. I mean, some of the units he was saying that he was talking to, he never even fucking sat down with them. And the
Oh
number of
man.
interviews that he had to have done was mathematically impossible with the amount of time that he had. So you have a guy writing a book about something he hasn't personally experienced, quoting somebody who is notoriously full of shit. I mean, the recipe here is not trending towards this beacon of truth and light.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But just tell the truth and be honest. One of the main reasons I'll say you don't have to be an expert in something to be able to discuss it. It's one of the main things I hear from military and first responders. I'm not going to go talk to somebody about what's happening in my own head, because what are they going to have in common with me? It's like, shut the fuck up. You don't need somebody who does your job. You need to talk to somebody who's an expert about how your brain works. There's 6 inches between your ears and understands trauma and the impact it can have on the neurological system, and ways that you can adjust the way that you talk to yourself or emotional control. Like, it's the number one excuse I get from people from the tactical world. Like, why would I go talk to that person? They don't know what it feels like. I'm like, yeah, I know. That's because they went to school their whole life to understand how your brain, you retard. And again, by that, I'm talking about myself.
I'd like to touch on that, and then come back to the McJojo, and then we can tie that in a bow. From my experience, I 100% agree, but I want to give an example, and it's not so much for you, but it's definitely for the listeners. If we can help one person, I've met with psychologists, and they're great when their skill set, but they weren't inclined. They didn't have an idea about first responders, military, and so on. The New Zealand SAS, she's now left that unit, psychologist Alia Bodulova, one of the top psychologists in the world. Anybody listening, Google psychologist kidnapped in Syria. Amazing story. All these psychologists are telling me, you need to get a hobby, Damien. You need to grow tomatoes or do this. And they're technically correct on how the brain works. But she literally said to me, Damien, you don't need a hobby. You just need to do this. She knew the fancy words, and essentially it's self-care, doing something for you, changing some things in your brain. But my friends that were way better operators than I were, they wouldn't have been able to explain it in the way that she did. And then the psychologists that didn't have at least experience of EMS and so on, couldn't explain it. So that combination of a psychologist in that space was absolutely brilliant for me. And that one piece of advice changed my mind, literally my brain and my happiness almost immediately. So I agree with you on that as well.
It's a tough step to take. And, I run into people say, well, I tried talking to a psychologist or a psychiatrist and it didn't work. And I said, okay, how many times did you talk to him? Well, I talked to him once and it didn't work. I'm like, oh, that's weird. You tried to build a brick house and you only got like 3 bricks down because you don't know how to build a brick house. Also, it's like any other relationship. They're not all going to stick. You have to find somebody that you feel comfortable with. You have to find somebody that you can with, that you're comfortable being vulnerable with and actually telling the truth, because otherwise you're just sitting there jerking yourself off. You actually have to commit to doing the work that you need to do. And it's not easy, and it's not going to happen the first time, and it's not magic. You're not going to go sit with somebody for 60 minutes and come out of that a completely different person. It might take you 10 sessions. It might take you 100 sessions. I don't know. But I can tell you based on my own experience, like, life is better on the other side of that journey.
Yeah, I agree. A former guest, you might have met him in the past, Nick Caldwell, SASR, runs themillgym.com. Anybody that's wanting to look at that, please do. He uses psychologists now for performance enhancement. So instead of trying to get back to where he's supposed to be, now it's a performance enhancer. So I love the idea of that. Just one bit that I couldn't quite get my head around there with Grossman and in general, that person is supposed to be an expert, and you said he's spoken to so many units and things as well. You trust someone in that position, and it's someone like me can't comprehend when they're going to lie. And I remember when you were saying about those studies, it's physically impossible to have done those amount of research. I remember one from reading the book. I think Grossman quoted in Vietnam there was 1 million rounds shot to one Viet Cong being killed or enemy being killed. That number seems a bit, as you said, McDojo-ish to me, seems a bit made up. And maybe they're talking about, gunships and rounds as well. But even just that number on the face of it in a prima facie case doesn't seem right, does it?
No, I mean, I like to make up numbers too. I mean, and you can put numbers like, you know what I mean? I mean, where did that come from? Like put an asterisk on that. And then in the footnotes of the book, do me a favor and tell me where that came from. I mean, because that is ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly. That's the
Well,
bar
you
I
know
wanted
what?
to.
Well, here's the thing. Grossman was the beneficiary of good timing. He came to prominence after Vietnam, before 9/11, when the actual amount of combat experience was almost non-existent. So he was going to push back on him.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Look, thanks for covering off on that. I really wanted to touch on that, considering that's how literally you and I first connected. I'm not sure if you're okay to talk about this one, but I wanted to touch on an elephant in the room in the SEAL community or in Special Forces community. A little bit of controversy. You did speak about it with Mike Glover on one specific job, but the book Code Over Country. Would you be okay to speak about that, or is it off limits?
No, there's nothing off limits with me.
Awesome. I'm not going to mention names because I actually do think the people that he mentioned in that book are good people. But what's your take on the controversy that's caused in the special operations community? What do you think he's on point? Do you think he's well off point? What's your take on it?
I think that if for whatever reason in your life that you go looking for one particular thing, you're more likely to find it. And I think the science is well documented in that. They do exercises where it's like the stop sign drill or the red car exercise. You're like, oh my God, I've never seen so many red cars in my life. It's like you're actually seeing the exact same amount. You've kind of primed yourself. I did an over 3-hour interview with Lt Col. And he was the guy who wrote the book Code Over Country. And I have no issue whatsoever with people who are critical of the SEAL community, of the special operations community, and the military in general. I actually think the military would be far better served if there was a level of transparency, both on the good and bad, the failures and successes, of course, protecting tactics, techniques, and procedures and SOPs. Like, of course, we should not put people who are still fighting battles or, toeing the line for us to allow us to do the things that we do. His book is largely based on what he considers to be the shortcomings of the SEAL community. And I asked him about it. He's like, well, there's been enough books that have been written about the successes. And it's like, yeah, but when you write a book that is all pointed in one direction, you're assuming that other people are aware of and have read the other points of view. And that is a poor assumption to make. I was not involved in any of the things that he wrote about in that book. I am peripherally aware of some of them. And shit happens. The SEAL community is not perfect. Have war crimes been committed by SEALs? Yes, absolutely, without a doubt. And I hate to tell you, if you took the same level of scrutiny and pointed it towards any other military unit inside of the U.S. military and probably any other military in the world, you are going to find the same thing. And that sucks. And that doesn't mean that the military is broken. And it doesn't mean that people who are SEALs are trying to be murderers or anybody else. It means that we are looking at a cohort of human beings. And some people have higher ethics and moral standards than others. And some people are completely and other sociopathic in nature. And those are the things that you're going to find. I mean, if you go deep into the shadows in any community, you're going to find shit you didn't want to know about. I think the more important question is, how does the community respond when those things are found? And what are they doing to make sure that they are the absolute vast minority as opposed to the norm?
Yeah, very good response. Thank you. And what you say about, just about every country, every army or every military, same thing. I've listened to a lot of Damian Lewis's books. I wouldn't say read, because I don't have that much time to sit down and read a book now, but Damian Lewis's books on Tutu SAS back in World War II. And same thing, it's, war is hell, and you're in a crazy situation. And if you want to call it war crimes, sure, but it's not just, there's not just the bad guys. It's not just Hitler's goons and so on that were doing those bad things. It's bad people in bad situations as well.
Well, the environment itself, it's such an extraordinary thing to ask of people. And some people are bent by it and some people are broken by it. It's just, I actually don't think it's possible to have warfare exist where those type of things are not going to happen. I wish I could say it wasn't, but it's such an extraordinary thing to ask of people. It just, for some people, is like making an omelet and the eggs come out perfectly, and then there's the yolk and the white, just taking a whisker. It's just, for some people, that's what happens. Yeah. And when that happens, or if it came into that environment already a little bit broken and you add that additional stress, it's ugly. And I wish that it wasn't, but that is the reality of war.
Look, I came from a special forces background, and then I became a police officer here in Australia. And I can say exactly that. Policing is literally, you need to know you're accountable for every word you say, every action you do, and you're supposed to be able to record every action and word everybody else does as well. And that is a different. It's not battle. It's not anywhere as dynamic as the great example you gave of your gunfight, where everything just does go wrong. And soldering is not policing. That's the simple fact, and that's what I see people out there trying to look at soldering as policing. It's not that at all.
Yeah, it's, people assume, or they'll say, oh, well, you used to be a SEAL. What do you think about this arrest? I'm like, I don't know. I don't even know what the laws are. I don't know what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do. And just because I carried a gun a long time ago does not make me an expert on every tactical situation at all. Like if you were to ask me, hey, how would you look at potentially assaulting this target? Okay, now we're a little bit more in my wheelhouse. I could teach you, or I could give you advice on maybe how to safely approach a vehicle and extricate people from the vehicle from the world I came. But for clarity, I wasn't trying to arrest anybody. So there's a little bit of overlap. Not that, you know what I mean? Not that much. I mean, don't get me wrong. We would flex type people and things like that, but it just wasn't the same. I wasn't there. It's just a different rule book that you're playing by. So there's some similarity, but it doesn't make you expert. And that is why in almost every situation, regardless if people ask me about it or not, I do not engage because I'm not the person to ask.
Man, that's such a good point. And that's what I come across with the how not to die stuff that I teach. You're probably unaware, but I teach self-defense and combatives. And it's for civilian self-defense, but it's using military unarmed combat. And that's not trying to arrest someone. Because that's some skill. And no. I've had top jiu-jitsu people and top law enforcement trainers on the show. That's something that I'm not so good at. I was okay-ish as a cop, but man, those guys have some skill. But to military combat or self-defense or so on, it's very different, and you know that. And in a dire situation, I want every female in the world to know that, so that they can ruin the bad guy. But it's not jiu-jitsu. And
yeah, but well, here's the thing. So I've been doing, my wife is a world champion jiu-jitsu at the adult level and at the master's level. She was a blue belt, world champion, purple belt. She podiumed. I know she went first. I'm not sure she was second or third, but I'm not going to hypothesize because she'll get upset. And I'm just trying to be transparent. She's won at the master's level. I've been doing jiu-jitsu now for somewhere between 5 to 6 years.
Yep.
It's not magic. And it's not the solution to every problem either. I have an issue with people that think that they train jujitsu so they know how to fight. And I would say if you are in a grappling match and you're holding on to somebody at a range where they can't punch you in the face anymore, you're going to do really well. But if you don't know how to close that distance, and what if you encounter a kickboxer? You're telling me you're going to try to get from a range where they can kick you in the head and punch you in the face, and you think you're going to somehow get through their strength to yours? You're going to wake up in the hospital. So all of these things are tools. I would like to see cops at least having to train jiu-jitsu because they have to put their hands on people. So they are approaching that range where they physically, and I have buddies who are cops. I ask them, how many times a day do you touch somebody? They're like, every single day. It should be mandatory, but it should not be the only thing that they train, because it's not, there's no, jujitsu is a tool. There is no tool that exists in the world that solves all problems.
You're 100% correct. And talk about that. I mean, maybe talk about, a pen as a tool. And funnily enough, it makes almost the same hole as a 9mm, which is a great tool for some times changing someone's mind. But, we, as special operators, we look at things in a different mindset. Everything's a tool to be used at the right time. But when you get the religion, and I say that word a little bit meanly, the religion of my gong fu or kung fu or feng shui is all, it gets a bit silly.
It's people being dog. They're, without recognize it, they're just defending something that they love from an irrational or an emotional perspective. I get it. I don't engage in arguments with those people. It's like, all right, cool. I mean, I don't actually need to change your mind, because if you ever use this stuff, the real world is going to. And I also don't feel like it's my job to correct everybody for everything or try to make people feel the way I do.
Yeah, good point. That's bringing us to where I want to go with the current situation. But to get there, it really seems like your transition from wearing a gun and doing high-end hits to where you are now has gone fairly well. I've spoken with this a lot with special operators, retired and so on, and also coming straight out. How did your transition go mental health wise? Because you don't seem connected to the identity. You seem to have purpose, and your identity is not linked to, you've actually stated it, you're not that guy. So how did your transition go to the world you're in now from DevGru?
I'll start with the description. Like, it appears like your transition went well. I am no different than anybody else. I am aggressively average at everything that I've done in my life. I barely graduated high school. I played high school sports, and by that I mean I was on the team and not the star player, if you know what I mean. Like, hey, we need to bring in a guy who's going to make a difference. And they would look down the roster. They spent zero additional time trying to wonder whether or not I was the guy they were going to put into the game. I have struggled in everything that I have done. I just keep it to myself most of the time, unless I'm directly asked about it. So yeah, I had a job that I had available to me when I got out of the military. So economically, it made sense. But I stayed in that job too long because I was making an amount of money at that time that I thought was unbelievable. But I was so completely emotionally drained for working for that organization, specifically the person I was working for, that I was miserable. So I quit that job, and I went from making like $150,000 a year to zero overnight, and literally started selling things out of my garage. I went onto Craigslist and just started going into our garage and selling everything that I possibly could so we could have more money in a bank account. And I just started saying yes to every opportunity. And some of them were great. Some of them were wastes of time. Some of them introduced me to great people. Some of them introduced me to people that sucked. And I couldn't sleep at night, and I would lose weight, and I felt like I had ulcers, and I would have a resting heart rate of 120 sometimes, trying to figure out what the fuck I was going to do next, with 3 young kids transitioning out of the military. And then asked me to start publicly speaking or skydiving, or do what you should do, a podcast, and all of these things. Like, it may look on the outside to some people like, hey, I just knew what I was going to do the whole time, and you're really just nailing them. All I'll say is, you never know what somebody else is actually going through. And most people, regardless of how wealthy or famous or prominent they are dealing with the same shit that you are. probably dealing with it at a slightly more private level, or they just don't feel comfortable talking about it. So I would love to say I had it dialed. I didn't. I made a shit ton of mistakes. I tried to learn from them and not make the same ones over and over again. Like an early mistake that I made when I got out of the military. I stayed with that company for money. And it was such a great lesson. Like money, it doesn't matter what you make. If you hate what you're doing, you're going to be miserable. And that's going to impact how you are as a husband and father. It's going to impact your relationship with your kids. It's going to impact how you communicate with people. And it's not worth it. And since that day, when I quit that job, I don't give a shit what an individual or brand offers me to work with me. If I don't want to do it, the answer is no. And you can keep writing zeros on the check all you want to and go fuck right off into the sunset. I'm not going to do it.
Man, I said at the start before we started recording, I find it hard to keep up with you, but there's so much to unpack and so much gold in the things you say. You know, you say you barely graduated high school and so on, but I just find that people have been through things. We talked about Grossman.
Oh no, that's a verifiable fact. I'll be more than happy to find for you my curriculum is 1.8 GPA, which is a low bar that I tripped over and barely slid underneath. Like I barely graduated high school. I'm not joking. Verifiable fact.
Mate, you're so humble. But you've experienced those things, and you're open enough and humble enough to speak to what you've done. That perfectly ties into where I want to be now. You know, you've got the Cleared Hot. I'm almost getting on the Cleared Hot show because you got the logo in the background, but not quite. But
yeah, I got a camera. Normally it would be over there, so it'd be. And if I'm being honest, I don't know how to hook that one up to my laptop because I'm an idiot. So.
You got Cleared Hot, and now there's also change agents. The listeners, many of them don't know you, perhaps. So, what got you started with Cleared Hot, and then what's the difference with change agents? Because they look like some really powerful conversations.
So, if you've ever listened to Joe Rogan podcast, you'll hear him say about 7,000 times per year, "Hey, you should start a podcast." Wish I could say it was something crazy. The first time I was on his show, he did not say that to me. The second time I was on his show afterwards, he goes like, you should start a podcast. And one of the guiding principles that I try to use in my life, if I find somebody that is more successful than me or smarter than me, which for clarity is very easy, that means every person in every room that I go into, I listen to them, or I will at least consider what they say. So Joe said, "Hey, you should probably start a podcast." And of course, in my infinite smartass wisdom, I said, "No, I would probably take your advice if you were a little bit more successful in this genre. But keep working. Maybe one day you'll get there, and maybe one day I'll take your advice." He just looked at me. He's like, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" I don't know. So that's where it came from. And I was working with a brand at the time. And anybody familiar with the U.S., like it's kind of like I would say a law enforcement military brand, 511 Tactical. I was one of their ambassadors, and it was there. One of the guys I was working with heard the podcast, and he said, "You know what? We will buy you a podcasting kit. That's an awesome idea." So it wasn't my idea. It wasn't my idea to buy and here we are, 7.5 years. And people ask me, like, what's the podcast about? I actually don't know how to answer that because, like, I'll talk to anybody. I'm just fascinated by people's journey and what makes them tick. So I talk to some military people, but I also talk to civilians, and everything in between. So I don't actually know what it's about specifically. And then a year and a half ago, a production company, a buddy at Carr, who is a very successful author now post-career, New York Times bestselling author of the Terminal List series, which is actually now a TV show on Amazon. And I think they're doing what would it be, a prequel or an origin story maybe of, even before the Terminal List. Now they're starting to tell the story of the characters that bifurcate and come back into the Terminal List. He was an executive producer, and his podcast was hosted by a production company called Ironclad. And they reached me. It was their idea. Again, not my idea. I didn't pitch anybody about this. They said, "Hey, this is what we want to do. What do you think about creating a series where we limit to an hour or as close as we can?" Because sometimes I'll go over because I just really don't give a shit what they say. I'm like, 60 minutes. Oops, forgot to start my watch. And sometimes we're talking about awesome shit. So it's like, I think I'm the host, and we have a little bit of time left on this SSD drive. So I'm going to keep going. but it's a much more targeted conversation. So each person, idea of a topic I kind of want to stay on track with. And I'll also be honest, the success of the show is because of Ironclad, not because of me. They are finding the guests. They're helping with the prep work on specifically the topics. So we'll discuss at a broad level, like, what do you think about these topics? I'm like, I love all of those. They'll go to work and find people to talk about inside of those topics. What do you think about this? I love it. I get a briefing packet. I can do some research. So, I mean, I sit down and have conversations. They're doing the booking. They're doing the editing. They're doing the production. And it's going great. It's been awesome. I mean, I'm having conversations in really specific narrow bands that are actually really interesting to me. You know, what is going on with the cartels in Mexico? Where is fentanyl coming from? Let's talk about the border crisis. You know, the dyes that might be in our clothing that are making us sick. Let's talk about big pharma. Let's talk about, like, it's awesome. But again, I didn't create that, and I'm certainly not the reason that it's successful.
I'm with you, Andy. I mean, it's amazing to me, the power of the interwebs. I'm setting up a call with the former All Blacks coach after we finish. I'll text him because he's just got to the country he's going to be working in, and I get to speak to one of my heroes. And that's just the power of the interwebs these days. It's amazing, and what I love. Yes, personally, we get that, which is great. I mean, it fills my cup many times getting off the shows, but the listeners and the viewers get to see a side of that person they didn't know, and they get to ask questions. And I think you and I know I'm authentic, I know you're authentic, so I can hopefully speak for you that we're authentic in our conversation, and people pick up on that, and they're really grateful. That brings me to the last two questions. What's your current passion and
Fire away.
purpose? What's your current passion and purpose? And then, and I'm going to finish every show 24 this year with, what advice would you give your younger self?
Yeah, the passion and purpose is interesting because I was thinking about this at the tail end of last year. I think it's easy to fall into the trap of being angry.
Wow.
I think a lot of people out there are angry, and I find myself sometimes frustrated by the stupid things that stupid people do. And I can get wrapped up in that. And there's a whole ecosystem about being an angry vet and just bitching about things, and, you know, let's debrief and discuss this. And you're like, what the fuck do you know about that? Nobody does. Or I should say the people who are from that world know about it, but you're hanging your, like, angry vet title all over this. And I realized going into this year, it's not that I was angry, but I felt like sometimes I had an edge the way that I was thinking about things. And all I really do is help. I just want to leave an impact or an imprint that is positive. I do not want to take away. I want to add to the environment that I am in. And I'm trying to use my platform to do that. And it, you know, I literally was having this conversation with myself like 45 days. Like, man, you know, the podcast is going great, but what can I do better? And I realized I just need to focus more on being positive. You know, the anger thing, whether or not I'm frustrated about something that somebody says, like, who gives a shit? Let's provide solutions, not critiques, not tearing people down, even if they deserve to be torn down. Maybe address what happens and then totally lateral the conversation to food for thought. You could do this. And instead of critiquing somebody else, you could just try to add value with people. Take it or leave it. Take it or leave it. Leave the internet. You know, people bitch about, well, I can't believe you have ads on your I'm like, well, I can't believe you haven't figured out they're skippable. You know, like, you don't have to listen to it. It's, you know, like, there are easy ways to get around some of these things. So that, I'd say, is my purpose going forward. I want to be a value add. That's really what's kind of my guiding principle going forward.
It's awesome. That really is. And I don't say that lightly, because, you know, the angriness, the haters or whatever you have in the world, they're loud. Yeah. But everybody really loves positivity so much more. And that's just brilliant. And that's going to be the title of this show, which I really, really thank you for. And the last one, what advice, maybe this dovetails off that, what advice would you give to your younger self?
It would depend on the topic.
Mm,
I am remarried and I was married for 19 years and 11 months. And I got married when I was 23. So if I was to give myself advice, the younger man, the advice I would give myself is take a little bit more time to figure out who you are as a person. Now, having said that, I wouldn't take back if I am remarried and it has redefined for me what my definition of love is. But for me to have that redefined, I would need to go through those experiences again. So I would not erase them from my life.
yeah.
It also wouldn't erase them because I have 3 amazing children that I would not give up for the world. But I look back and it's not my ex-wife's fault and it's not my fault. We were so young and we didn't know who we were as people, let alone being old enough to bring people into the world. And then we grew. And for some people, you grow apart. And we fell into that. And some people stop trying as those relationships go on. And I think both my wife and I, if we're being honest, at some point in time, we did stop trying. It wasn't the right fix. And I do think we made the right decision to split because we're better people and better parents because of it. And I'm not saying get divorced if you have arguments with your significant other, but some situations are not meant to work. So from a relationship perspective, for young men, I would say take the time to figure out how you are before attaching to somebody else who might be in exactly that same phase. From a financial perspective, obviously people need food, water, shelter, ability, like all those things. So I'm not saying like give up all that to go do long walks on the beach because that's what fills your cup. Like I get it. You need to eat, you need to have those things, but man, I don't know how many things I chased when I was younger. If I could just like buy this, and now at this point in my life, I'm like, I don't give a shit about any of those things. I just want to go do cool things. The value of the experience over the cool thing. So I would say, money, it can buy you cool things, but maybe not happiness. And a lot of the times, Pitt with such a great line in Fight Club, the things that you own end up owning you. Fuck, that is so true. I heard that quote 20 years ago, and I was like, whatever. I mean, I was obviously staring at how handsome he is. I was just gazing into his eyes, hoping that he was gazing back to me. And that doesn't even make me gay because Brad Pitt, I'm powerfully hetero, but Brad Pitt is so attractive that I would consider a relationship with him. And I don't know what that says about me. But, it's such a powerful quote. It's just lost on me at the time, but it's so true now. So, the advice I would give back to my younger self, it really would depend on the area of the question. I mean, it's a broad question. I can totally appreciate it, but I'd rather give I'd rather give more specific advice that would be impactful narrowly than broad advice that may not be that impactful.
Yeah, and I agree. I do want to throw that out there because we'll see what sticks with the audience and see what the guest says. But you nailed it, and Pat Mack, he said the same thing. You wouldn't change what you did because it got you to where you are and it got you the things that are going on in your life right now. But you could look at those things with a different mindset. But look, your answer was awesome and brutally open. So again, thank you for your authenticity. Dude, I'm done. It's been great. I don't want to hog your time. I know you do longer shows, but I don't want to. I'm really appreciative of you coming on. Thank you so much, Andy. It's been amazing. Listen to you. I've got some absolute gold nuggets off there, and I don't mean that lightly at all. I don't blow smoke, but yes, some hella notes there. And I just want to say again, thanks to Kirk and Nick Cush and Mike for connecting us and also I won't mention his name, but also the person who got us on the phone together the other day. He was a great guest on the show as well.
Yeah, and I would just like to thank all Australians for their mastery and usage of the word cunt because it's amazing.
Australians and New Zealanders, if we can't what is that? It's said in Mel Gibson's show, if we can't route them out, we'll breed them out. That's what we're trying to do. Come here. We'll come here and take your money and take your women.
I mean, between the Aussies and the British, it's a close second place on the use of that word. I will let you guys fight it out between the two. All I can say is I love how wide ranging and broadly applicable it is. And I love it every time I hear it. And plus with the accent, it's just so much better.
Oh man, hey, absolute pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll hit pause and we'll have a quick chat.
Yep.
Hi, thanks for watching. I'm Damien Porter, former Special Forces operator, and check out my new project for 2023 at hownottodie.com.au, where I've combined all my Special Forces training and police officer experience to help others. Thanks for watching.